Hello, everybody, and welcome to this another sort of add-on demonstration talk. What I've been doing is looking at some of the new stuff that's in version 4 of basic machinery, like the geothermal and stuff. Because they produce "quote unquote" more power, right? But it's interesting because the issue, Okay, the common conception in modded Minecraft, and this has been around for a long time, especially in modded Minecraft, is it's sort of the old I forget what was a TV show. Anyways, it's more power. You know what I'm talking about? At least here in the United States, there was a long-running TV show. So, anyways, more power always seems to be what people think is the solution. And a lot of times that is actually the solution. But it also depends on the implementation, right? The implementation of a particular system very much dictates what the application of that system is and how effective that application of the system is. It just isn't the fact of, this machine produces X amount of power. How is that power implemented within the overall system that you're working with? And when you say overall system, you have to include everything. You have to include the power cables. The gas cables, the fluid cables, all of the different components in the system that you need in the system in order to generate the power. So it isn't just, X machine produces twice the amount of power. It's how does that machine and the overall implementation of that machine inside of your construct that you're trying to build, how is that going to be effective? Because you know what? Using the top of the line power generation that produces 20 million RF per tick isn't going to do you a bit of good if the power cables running into that system don't support that sort of system, right? It isn't any good. And this is a good example of it. So I have the geothermal system set up here, right? And you can look at iEmotionless video on this. This is the new system, and it's a little bit of work to build it, but as you can see, it produces electricity real fast. And this sort of setup, I've got one oil generator, and it's pretty much keeping up with both of these. They're full most of the time. I'm getting little areas here where it's just spinning back and forth, which means that I think 2 is probably a good setup. I think 3 you end up with one of them being empty for too long period of time. And being empty isn't bad because, and you'll see the reason why. But I think this is a good setup here for this. And you've got one oil generator. This is producing lava, and of course it produces. I've got the advanced solar generators from the basic machinery add-on as well. But here's the issue about this. Watch the little yellow block. It's not instantaneous. In other words, we don't have instantaneous power connected to this or this or this or this or this. It takes a finite amount of time in order for the power pulse to get from point A to point B. And that's the issue. That's the limiting factor on building these power systems. And that is the fact that it takes a finite amount of time for the power to move from the power generation system that you have to the target block that's producing the resource. And look at I put the batteries up here to illustrate this. Look at this one here. It's full. Why is it full? Because it's closest to the power generator, you know. The same with this one. This one's the same way, and this one's the same way as well. But look at this one. That one's not full. And this one isn't full. Although we are getting a little bit of a yellow block or a green block here, meaning that we will eventually fill this up. But any sort of system like this, what you want to have is continuous resource generation. I mean, that's the ideal, right? And in this case, you want to make sure you have the furnaces running almost continuously. The miner's going to produce every time it gets a pulse. So the more pulses it receives, the more you're going to get. But the furnace runs on it stays on for a little bit longer amount of time. I mean, the miner, it does its thing and then it's ready to go. But the furnace runs for a little period of time, which is really nice because you need that in order to process the thing. You don't want, I was told that if the furnace gets multiple items getting pushed into it, that there's a chance for you to lose items here. Now, in a massive ore generation system that you're going to have, then you losing an item here or there isn't really an issue. That's not a point. But the point is you want to be efficient as you possibly can. But I think this is a good illustration of what the limiting factor of this power system here. The limiting factor of this system isn't the oil generation. It isn't the solar panels. It's the distance that the pulse has to travel in order to reach the target. And I think you can see this very plainly here. So when we design these systems, it's like, people are saying, use this, use this, use this. Well, number one, you want to be efficient. This is a relatively expensive generator. You need silicon, you need plastic, so you got to build a silicon generator and all that kind of stuff. So this is, this is sort of the next tier in the, in the system. But, if you look at the cost of this and maybe the cost of this, let's go over here and we'll look at this. I'm using 3 solar panels here, and that's generating lots of thing. So let me I gotta look around my my microphone here. Let's look at these crafting recipes on this stuff here. So see, the generator, that's relatively expensive. You're going to need to, generate oil, generate lava, and then the circuit board, which requires the silicon and stuff. So, this is sort of the next tier stuff. Not that it's bad. It's just, you have the potential to use less of this, but in the long run, is it really worth it? If you look at the advanced solar generator, runs, I think it's probably twice as fast as the normal. You can see that it's running relatively quickly. And that, that right there is it's relatively expensive, sort of, kind of. You need this, which that's not bad at all. And this, which is somewhat expensive, but when you get your resources coming in, that's actually not that big of a deal, especially when you supplement your, your diamond manufacturer and your, with the secondary systems that you're gonna have to do. Now, the question is, what's more cost effective, and what's more effective to use? Well, it kind of depends on what you want to do. What would be nice would be to be able to set up the ideal situation would be to set up a centralized, now we can kind of compare the two here. Yeah, see, this is working much faster than this, and it's only a relatively more expensive system. Yeah, this is definitely a better choice, and it's within the scope of being, fairly efficient. I mean, look at the amount of resources we're producing compared to this. So, yeah, I think this would definitely be a good choice here. See, we're already filling up here. But the thing about this would be a good system if, in fact, you weren't hindered by the fact that you have basically have to wait for the electrical pulses to reach the system. Now, I'm running 3, basically this bank right here is one, and this bank right here is another one. And this seems to be pretty much the limit on one of these generators. I tried setting up 4 of them, but the one on the end, and again, it's mainly because of the distance that the electrical pulse has to travel. But 4 is just too much. 3 is pretty much ideal. It's pretty much ideal because all of the furnaces are pretty much running full time, and the generator and the miners are running pretty much as quick as you would expect them to run, except for the ones on the end here. You see how the pulse is just doesn't quite make it down here, except for yeah, I mean, it's going here first before it's getting to here. And you can plainly see that if you just watch the pulses. So really, you're limited not in the amount of power that you can generate, but in the application of that power in your system. So anyways, and so is this better than that? Well, I don't know. I think it's pretty much a toss-up, really. In this sort of large-scale system like this, I personally would prefer to do this, use the advanced solar power panels, as opposed to setting up something like this. Now, this may be useful in the advanced power, do an advanced power generator. Now, I know that there's that impact thing, and I can tell you right now, I would never use that impact thing. Why? Because it's just ridiculously expensive, and there's just no point to it. If I'm going to use something, I'm going to use this guy. I think the amount of generation that you're getting out of this is quite good, and we can run this through the advanced power converter and get advanced power. So every 5 ticks, let's say, every 5 pulses, we're going to get 1 advanced power. So really, I mean, you could hook up 2 of these into one of the advanced power, and that advanced power system would be running almost continuously. It would be running almost continuously with 1. So, I mean, if we just count it, it's just, it's a... Yeah, I wouldn't use that impact generator just because it's too complicated for what you're getting out of it. When you can go this route and do the same thing, cheaper and more effective, I think, in the long run. I mean, the impact generator does produce a lot of power, but I don't think it's worth it for the time and money that you're spending on it. Money being resources in this case. So, there you have it. And the reason I got it set up like this is I wanted to minimize the footprint here. In other words, we've got 1 fluid generator, 1 oil, and we've got this. And, the idea, I'm trying to minimize the length that these guys are going. Now, I could put them right next to each other, but then you'd have these connections going across. There's no way not to, if you put them right next to each other, this is what you're going to get. And now we've got another branch that the system's going to have to deal with. See what I'm saying? That's a wasted branch. That's wasted time in the system, and we don't want that. So you have to separate them by at least a space so you don't get that overlap. You want as straight as lines as possible with the shortest lines as possible. Now I could cinch this up, obviously, pull it even closer, which would something I should have done. I should pull this back. I mean, I could pull this back to, here probably, or even closer, and fix some of this distance. But the top line really isn't an issue because these guys are running. We're getting backup power here. In other words, we got more than enough power on the top tier. The real problem is the power along the bottom here, especially on these outliers. It really is an issue here, I mean, it's taking the path of least resistance, so it's going to go here first. So I just thought it was interesting. I wanted to share that with you. Kind of a little bit of insight into, I've been doing a lot of experimentation, believe me. I've tried all kinds of different things. So this was sort of the best case that I found using this sort of setup. But honestly, I would probably just go with, I'm probably going to just go with this sort of thing here. Yeah, because that's even though it's more expensive than this, it isn't as expensive as setting this sort of thing up here. And you've got essentially the minimum distance here that you're going to have for any of these power systems, because distance is definitely a factor. The distance that the power pulse has to travel impacts the effectiveness of your power system. That's just the way this is. I'm not complaining. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining that what's happening here. That's fine. I love these limitations. You have to think about your limitations when you're implementing these systems. That's what makes it really interesting, is working around the limitations, offsetting those limitations. So yeah, this is I'm not complaining about the fact that it takes a finite amount of time for the power pulse to travel. That's not my point. My point is that is a consideration that you have to take into account when you're designing these systems. You just can't overlook it. It's an integral part of how you design these systems, and minimizing the travel time of that power pulse is a key factor in designing efficient power systems in basic machinery. So anyways, I just wanted to share that with you. I thought it was a little insight that I've kind of gleaned from just messing around with all this stuff and trying it all out. So anyways, I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye now.